Racial trauma. It stems from the result of chronic experiences, racism, and discrimination. It contributes to a constant state of hypervigilance for racially based slights and microassaults at the individual, institutional, and cultural levels. Race-based stress is a stress experienced due to chronic racism and discrimination. Race-based stress contributes to the use of maladaptive coping strategies to manage ongoing exposure to ambiguous microaggressions.
This module discusses racial trauma and race-related stress. We'll talk about how can we help be more aware of racial trauma, respond to students experiencing this stress, and have constructive conversations around racial issues.
It's important for us to realize that students who are from racially minoritized groups may have experienced, and to even now continue to experience, distress from ongoing day-to-day microaggressions.
This constant stress results in changes in brain chemistry that are associated with heart disease, high blood pressure, and a range of other physical and mental health ailments. And for our students, this can cause poor concentration and other attention-related issues.
We should all be concerned about racial trauma, including the causes and resulting problems. Knowing that a student is suffering from racial trauma is a predictor for current and future problems and must be addressed. Because racial trauma is real and experienced by many of our students on a daily basis, we also need to consider how to facilitate reflective and healing discussions.
We have responsibility for the health and well-being of our children. It's important for us to take care of our students and alleviate race-based stress in school. As we navigate these important discussions with our students, it's important that we realize and keep in check our own power and privilege. We must forfeit our own standing and authority to allow the students to actively and openly voice their feelings. So be prepared to experience some potentially difficult emotions, including shame, guilt, anxiety, or anger.
Facilitating these difficult discussions with students will require us to keep a few big ideas in mind. First, we must remember that our lived experiences cannot be used as a normal or typical benchmark. There are multiple and varied realities, each having its own truth.
Second, as we begin these discussions, it's also important to establish group norms for respect and be aware of the research on the causes and manifestations of systemic racism.
Third, our discussions must offer students opportunities to generate solutions and explain how these solutions work. We must have an opportunity to self-reflect regarding our own intersecting identities related to power, privilege, and oppression. Finally, when talking to students who are suffering racial trauma, it's best to begin with what's happened to you as opposed to what's wrong with you. Asking about what's happened avoids placing further trauma on the student by blaming them for their trauma.
There are also a few things we'll want to avoid, and these sometimes take a concerted effort. First and foremost, we cannot get defensive. Students must have a chance to speak uninhibited by the teacher's personal feelings.
We must be careful not to divert from the topic of race that is the heart of these discussions. We must not minimize what has been a long and oppressive history of racism in our country. In fact, Dr. Stephen Nifley recommends the following ground rules when undertaking difficult conversations on race. We share but don't compare. Hear others without judgment. We are all learning about diversity through the social rules we have been given, so we want to reflect on those. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Stay leaned in and make an effort to understand. Focus on the impact rather than the intent or words and actions. Be willing to be called out as well as calling others in. Sometimes discussions on race can be planned as part of a lesson, but these discussions can also occur organically. Following microaggressions that are common and hurtful to people of color, recognizing microaggressions is a key to understanding and talking about racial trauma. Microaggressions, whether intentional or not, communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative racial slights and insults to people of color.
One common form of microaggression is the micro-insult. These involve generalizations like, "Why do your people like dancing so much?" or "You're a credit to your race." While these may be unintentional insults, these statements are demeaning to persons of color.
Watch how these teachers deal with micro-insults.
Okay, you're going to assign roles in your science group, and remember, every role is important.
Well, we need to have Mason do the math part.
But I wanted to do the acting part. I don't like math.
No, we need to have Rihanna do the acting part because it needs to have dancing, and you'll be better at math.
What? I don't dance and don't want to. I'll do the math.
No, this won't work as well.
How's it going? Sounds like Rihanna wants to do the math, and Mason wants to do the acting.
But Mason will be better at the math, and Rihanna will be better at the dancing. So we'll get a better grade that way.
Why do you think Mason would be better at math and that Rihanna would be better at dancing?
I don't know, it's just the way they are.
That's not really fair. I mean, how would you like if someone made judgments about you without asking you? Someone just decided what you could or couldn't do without really asking you. I happen to know that Rihanna is one of the best math students in the class. And Mason is an amazing actor.
Okay, we didn't know that.
I know you didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't ask. You assume something about them based on how they look. You wouldn't want someone to make these kind of judgments without asking, right? So we need to be careful about when we make assumptions and how we treat each other.
I didn't mean to be rude.
I know you didn't mean to be rude, but when we make assumptions like this about people without getting to know them and without talking to them, it's not only rude, it's wrong. So let's be careful about how we treat each other.
Okay, guys, looks like we're out of time. Go ahead and gather your things and wait quietly.
Hey, where are my headphones? Someone swiped my headphones.
What's the matter?
My headphones were sitting right here on this table, and now they're gone. Somebody stole them.
Well, let's not jump to conclusions.
They were there on the table. I saw them.
Okay, let's just stay here till we get this figured out.
What? I have to get to my next class on time or I won't get a good lab station.
Make everyone empty their pockets.
Yeah, and search backpacks.
Wait, unless you two have proof, what you're saying to Lydia and Jamie is a little out of line.
We have to make sure they're found before we leave.
Yeah, but I see you seem to be treating students differently. You didn't ask Ellery.
I'll empty my pockets. I want to go.
No, I know you didn't take them.
But you think I did?
I don't know. If you didn't, then you wouldn't mind emptying your pockets.
Don't you see that's treating people differently? I mean, you didn't ask Ellery to empty her pockets, but you want Lydia and Jamie to? Can you see that maybe your behavior is a bit insulting?
Wait, we're not racists.
I'm not saying you are, but I am saying your behavior is insulting, as if you expect people of color to steal.
Yeah, I get it. I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was doing that, and now I'm embarrassed.
Me too.
I'm not trying to shame you. I just want you to be aware that you're treating people differently.
Thank you for realizing. I'm glad that you guys are aware.
Wait, I just noticed these. Someone must have dropped them and put them on my desk. Are these yours?
Yes.
Here you go. Looks like there are honest people.
But micro-insults are not only an issue between students. Sometimes it is the adult who uses micro-insults in dealing with students of color.
All right, so the United States is surrounded by oceans all around. And up at the top, we also have the Great Lakes. And then all through the United States, we have rivers running through. So I bet some of you have seen some of these oceans. What ocean have you seen?
I guess the Atlantic in North Carolina.
Oh, great. Have you been to Florida?
Yes.
Yes. Florida's great because you can see two oceans and you can see the Gulf of Mexico. Have you been to Mississippi?
I've been to St. Louis.
Great, that's fabulous. And I'm guessing that you have seen the Ohio River here in town?
What? I have been to California and I've saw the Pacific Ocean. And better yet, I went on a cruise to the Gulf of Mexico.
Really? Wow.
In this scenario, the teacher assumed that the white students would have extensive travel experience and have seen many lakes and oceans. But students of color would not have traveled and excluded them from the conversation. We must be careful not to allow our biases to affect the manner that we interact with students.
A second type of microaggression is the microinvalidation. These are statements that white people often see as innocuous or even positive, but they have a negative connotation. Microinvalidations communicate a lack of respect for the inequities and trauma that people of color deal with. Microinvalidations can include statements like, "Everyone can succeed if they try," or "We had a black president, so racism doesn't exist anymore." Watch how these teachers respond to incidents of microinvalidation.
So that's another reason we should be careful and see where racism exists in our society.
But there's no slavery anymore. I don't get what racism is. Slavery and racism isn't the same thing. You're free. You can do what you want. Same as me.
Molly, Mason is right. Even though slavery has ended, there's still racism even today.
We had a black president, so how can we be racist?
I'm not saying everything or everyone is racist, but there's still a lot of things that need to change. There's still a lot of things that are unfair for people of color.
Like what? You know what I think is weird? It's weird that Band-Aids are supposed to be flesh color, but they don't look like my flesh. So what? That's not racism. For white people, it's not a big deal, but if you're on the other side, it's kind of a big deal.
What can we do? I mean, we can't change the color of Band-Aids.
You're right, but as we speak out and make others aware, and we keep our eyes and our minds open to racism, that's the start of making big changes.
When people say that America is the greatest experiment in democracy the world has ever seen, what do they mean by that?
Representative government. So we all have representation locally and by state.
I think it's the fact that in America, anyone can do anything if they work hard and follow the rules.
Do we all believe that's a true statement?
Of course, everyone here has exactly the same freedoms.
Not exactly. It depends on the color of your skin.
Oh my god, no offense, but black people have more rights than others because everyone's afraid of being called a racist. You probably even have a better chance of getting a job.
Actually, Ellery, the facts don't support you on that. Unemployment is actually higher among people of color.
I might not even make it to the job interview. I'm more likely to get pulled over or stopped by the police for no reason.
Yeah, and people that look like us go to jail more for the same things white people do and don't.
Can you all see that even though slavery's over, things aren't equal and everyone's not equally free?
So you're saying that America is not a great country?
Yeah, sounds like you hate America.
No. Actually, what I love about this country is that we have the freedom to have this conversation and to try and make things better. In fact, I believe it's my civic duty or my patriotic duty to try and make things better.
That's why the Constitution has been amended. At one point, women didn't have the right to vote, but they did have the right to protest and make a change for the better.
Teachers also can be guilty of microinvalidations with students. Here's an example.
Okay, guys, that was enough. Let's pick this up tomorrow. Have a good day. What's the matter?
Well, you spent your whole time with the white kids, but us black kids didn't get to be involved.
I'm sorry, I was just calling random names.
But none of the black kids know if we're on the right track with the assignment.
I don't know what to tell you. I'm colorblind to race, so it's just random.
This comment is a microinvalidation. This statement suggests that race can be ignored or that we live in a post-racist society with no racial problems. This statement invalidates the experiences of students of color. We need to listen and address students' feelings in an honest and self-reflective way.
While micro-insults and micro-invalidations are often unintentional, micro-assaults are often intentional.
Micro-assaults involve the use of racial slurs, obvious put-downs, and purposeful exclusion of people of color from certain groups.
We need to be aware of microaggressions to recognize them and to call them out and discuss with our students how these actions are wrong and hurtful.
What? Why would you wear that? Do you go out and riot too?
What are you talking about? I support Black Lives Matter. I have marched and protest with them. There are no riots.
I've seen the riots on TV with the looters.
You know, many people protest to have their voices heard. Generally, rioting and looting, they're not associated with them.
But why do they need to be in the streets all the time?
Well, they don't want to be, but they don't believe that police are treating people of color fairly.
My dad said if everybody just did what the police told them to do, there wouldn't be a problem. Black people just want to argue. Your dad's a racist.
Okay. Let's think about this. What if I stopped you every day on the way to class and I made you empty your pockets? And I wasn't treating anyone else like this.
But that's not what's happening.
But what if I started? Would you be upset?
Of course.
So what if I said, as long as you don't complain, you don't have detention? Would that be fair?
Of course not.
But somebody could say that all you have to do is not complain, and then you don't get detention. Would that be right for you, though?
But nobody's searching black people every day. Yes, they are. People like us get pulled over and searched by police way more. And people say if we just take it and shut up, we wouldn't get in more trouble.
Can you think of any examples of how our society is having growing pains like we read in the book?
Yeah, like when some people fly the Confederate flag, even though it represents slavery and oppression.
Not true. The Confederate flag represents my ancestors in their fight against oppression.
Ellis, what oppression did your ancestors suffer?
The War of Northern Aggression and the South's fight for state rights.
Yeah, states' rights to have slaves.
We read the Articles of Succession here, and it said all the southern states wanted to leave because they all wanted slavery.
But it represents my ancestry. I'm flying the stars and bars.
What you do in private is your own business. But how would it make you feel if someone harmed your entire family and then waved flags about how great that experience was? How would it make you feel?
It would make me feel sick and hurt. It'd make me feel angry and want revenge.
Does having the right to do something make it an okay thing to do?
Sometimes.
When doesn't it?
When it doesn't serve a purpose, like I have the right to point at you constantly, but why?
What about if you were pointing at me, made me feel uncomfortable, but it made you feel good? Would that be okay then?
No, hurting someone else isn't okay, just because it makes me feel good.
That's how we feel about the Confederate flag. It doesn't help you, but it hurts us.
Doesn't need to hurt you. It's about me.
Sorry, man. It's also about us, but we wish it wasn't.
We've seen how microaggressions might play out in classroom situations and how teachers have facilitated discussions with students. In each case, the teacher was logical, cited facts, and was careful not to be defensive. In schools, it is inevitable that we all will observe microaggressions from students and adults. It is important to have a response to these situations and be responsible racial allies.
We must facilitate these conversations with our students. It's likely that you'll see some microaggressions coming from your coworkers. Remember, the idea is never to shame or shout down someone. We need to speak up to set the record straight and let people know what microaggressions are and how they can hurt people of color.
Your voice may be the only one that calls out attention to these incidents and can be the difference between a festering hurt and an understanding. Now let's hear from some of your colleagues and students regarding their experiences with racial trauma. Both adults and students in the school deal with racial trauma and race-related stress. Listen to these teachers and students discuss their experiences.
I'm with the Trauma-Informed Care team at JCPS, and I'm worried about our students. Some of our students are not only going through trauma, but a lot of our students now that educators are being exposed are now going through racial trauma as well. right? And so we teach the invisible backpack that kids carry to school every day with their thoughts and images and experiences. So now our kids are coming in wanting to get an education with this trauma that they have, whether it be poverty, whether it be a single home, really trying to make it. But now they have teachers who don't like them simply because of the color of their skin. Yeah. And educators are being exposed.
I'm not shocked that a person to the left or to the right doesn't like me because of, my locks or my skin color or my nose. I'm not shocked to that. I've been exposed to this all my life. And so now it's in front of you, right? So what are you going to do with this now? Because I've known this all my life, since the day I've came into this world, so now what are we doing?
The two words that come to mind for me quickly are frustration and pain. Like, I feel like I've seen so much pain and hurt on people's faces more than ever. And it's pulling so hard at heartstrings right now, trying to figure out how to maneuver. No matter if you're of color or you're white or whatever you are, we feel the pain too. Like when you say, this doesn't surprise me. That hurts. Yeah. Like, did I ever make somebody feel that way? I hope not, but I think we don't know. And so part of my biggest thing has just constantly been saying, teach me, like, tell me more about it, because I have to be honest about what I don't know. And like he said, it's such an opportunity for us. But I hate seeing the pain.
I think as a counselor, one of the things that I've been concerned the most about are for students that don't necessarily have a sense of belonging in their school, that also have all of this racial trauma happening in our city. Like, if they're coming back in person at some point, how do we make them feel safe? How do we increase that sense of belonging in a space where there's already so much turmoil? And we know as educators that's going to bleed over into our buildings once we come back. Yeah. So how do we create that sense of belonging to safeguard our students emotionally?
Well, for one, I think it's all about setting the table. My background, I used to teach the Compassionate School program. And every single day when the students come in, I verbally said out loud, we're going to set the table today. And in this classroom, we're going to laugh. In this classroom, we're going to forgive. In this classroom, I may say something that's going to harm you here. But in this classroom, we forgive. And so I think that has to happen very, very often, if not once a day, maybe twice or 3 times a day. Setting the table in your classroom or in your environment will most definitely play a part on how the day goes. And so will there be some uncomfortable conversations? Absolutely. Uncomfortable, but what? I would say uncomfortable, but respectful.
Police brutality in that sense has been going on for many years. But since we had so much time on social media and everything's on social media, then we could actually see it, and we saw it every day where it started getting to us. And basically, it saddens most of us, and then some people, they take it out in anger, I guess, and people are just tired of it.
I think it's just like it's all built up, and usually I've tried to ignore them, but with this situation, it's like, okay, so I wasn't crazy. This racism and these like microaggressions have always been here, but because nobody else has anything else to look at and like occupy their time with and use to ignore what's happening, it's really prevalent. And I think it's not really like what's happening in Louisville is, sadly, it's not surprising to me because of all of their bigotry that I've experienced like growing up here. It's just big now because everybody knows.
I think there's a lot of people that just like don't want to come to terms with it. And people don't like change, and they don't like doing anything to make an impact on something. And it's like, yeah, you can admit this is happening, but it's your actions have to back up your words in this situation. And I know a lot of people that are like, yeah, racism exists, but what can I do? Like, I'm just one person, but we have to go at this situation as a group. And it's not something that we can just ignore. which is like our biggest problem, is getting through to people who just want to choose to ignore it and just sit back.
I feel like when you're non-racist, it's just you're like sitting in your like little privileged world and you're like, yeah, I'm not racist, but you're not really doing anything to change it. And so people who don't have that privilege that you have still face racism on the daily. And then you're just like, you acknowledge it's there, but you're not willing to change anything with it. While anti-racist, I feel like means like you acknowledge that like, oh, either you acknowledge that like racism exists and like you're fighting against it, and like even if you do have privilege, you're still like using that for the best, and like you're trying to like give everyone voices that they deserve.
As you've seen in this video, microaggressions, micro-insults, and micro-assaults are common discriminating statements and are hurtful to people of color. It's important that we are able to recognize and identify common manifestations of these terms and respond properly.
It's important for us to support our students and fellow staff members and create a space for everyone to feel safe and heard. Being a racial ally means taking action. We hope you take what you have learned today and implement these strategies into your daily life for the well-being of those around us.